Good afternoon, everybody. Ryan Leary here from Recruiting Daily. Welcome to the webinar today. As we kick off, we're going to give everybody just a couple of seconds here to join in, get connected, and start hearing my lovely voice. We've got a great session today. In just a few minutes, we're going to kick off and get things going. All right, I think we are ready to go. We still have people joining, so as they come in, we will make sure everybody is caught up. So welcome today to the webinar, Got Mail, Trash to Spam, Strategic Email Practices that Nurture Passive Candidate Relationships. We are partnering with GEM on the webinar, and we've got a couple of great speakers today that we will introduce in just a moment. But before we do, I want to go through a couple of housekeeping rules and items for everybody on the call today. First off, we are recording the webinar today. So you can take notes, make sure you're taking notes, but you don't have to worry about screenshotting everything. After the webinar, we will have the full recording up on the site. Everybody will get an email with access to the webinar and some links for some downloads and some good things there. So be on the lookout for that. Usually takes a couple of hours after the webinar. We are taking questions today, so definitely don't be shy. We want this to be engaging. This is a fantastic topic with a lot of great information. So one of the things we want you to do is be interactive. On the right-hand side in your questions panel, open that up, drop your questions in. We will get to them. We do anticipate a good amount of questions today, so we will make sure we're pacing properly to get to those questions. If for whatever reason we do not get to your question, we will get that question answered. We will work with Steve and Dan to get those questions answered and make sure that you get the response back after the webinar, but we should be okay there. Last thing is we're live, so share this out, share this to your teammates, share it out on social, let people know what you're hearing, and if you're liking it, let them know, invite them in. So let's go ahead and kick off and begin some introduction. So we are doing this webinar today in partnership with GEM. If you don't know or haven't used GEM in the past, it's a fantastic tool. I love it. We started working with GEM a short while ago. They got a fantastic team. So essentially what you're looking at here with GEM, and Steve will do a much better job since Steve's one of the co-founders here. But it is an all-in-one sourcing platform. It's going to integrate with all of the other tools you're using, Gmail, LinkedIn, multiple applicant tracking systems. But essentially, you're going to be able to use this as your foundation for sourcing and CRM, and I think you're going to really like it. So with that, I'll let Steve take it from here. But Steve is the co-founder, CEO of GEM. He's been around the business for a long time. He's been at some of the largest brands doing some really great work. So Steve, welcome into the call. How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, fantastic. So guys, you're going to see a small little blip here. We're going to switch screens over to Steve, and he's going to share his screen. So in just a second, you should see that coming up.
All right. Can everybody see my screen? Ryan, can you confirm?
Yeah, we've got it. Yeah, we've got it now.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Ryan, and really excited to be here today. My name is Steve. As Ryan mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of GEM. We're actually formerly known as Zen Sourcer, so some of you might know us as that. At GEM, we built a sourcing automation product that automates a bunch of the manual, tedious work that goes into sourcing, including your follow-ups. We also help you nurture relationships with talent over time. But today, we're really excited to share best practices for email outreach based on millions of messages sent through our platform from thousands of recruiters over the past few years. So we'll start with a few industry stats on sourcing and why email outreach continues to be the best strategy for engaging with passive talent. Then we'll dive deep into best practices for email outreach based on all of our data. And then lastly, Dan will show you how you can use a product like Gem to automate many of these best practices. And as Ryan mentioned, there will be a few opportunities to field questions throughout, so feel free to submit questions as they come up. We really want to hear from you. All right, so why source? Well, it turns out that 80% of talent is passive, meaning they're not looking for new opportunities at the moment. What's interesting is that 90% of all talent, both passive and active, is open to hearing about new job opportunities, even if they're not looking. So sourcing allows us to engage with everyone out there, often before they're ready to apply, which gives us a unique edge in the talent market. The other great thing about sourcing is that sourced candidates are twice as good as applicants. Intuitively, this makes some sense. When you source, you're handpicking the candidate, so they're probably an ideal fit for your role. And interviewer time ends up being such a big factor in cost per hire, which makes sourcing a really great channel, a really efficient channel. Oops. Sorry, my screen went out there for a second. Give me one sec. Are people unable to see my slides?
We have your screen here. We see the what does email outreach? Yeah.
Perfect. Well, sorry about that. My screen went blank for about 10 seconds. Hopefully that's the last of it. Anyways, personally, one of the reasons I really love sourcing is because it allows companies to take control over their hiring goals. It's one of the few predictable channels where we can add more resources, reach out to more people, and see more results. And this is why more and more companies are investing in sourcing early, and they're making bigger and bigger investments as they scale. All right, so sourcing is important. What's the most effective channel to reach someone? Well, it turns out that most candidates prefer email over phone and InMail. And in case you were thinking, Gem helps us send emails, isn't this a little self-serving? Well, I wanted to call out that this is one of the few stats that isn't based on Gem data, straight out of an industry survey. It's intuitive that cold calling might not be preferred by candidates, but what about InMails? Well, it turns out that 40% of tech talent have their InMail notifications off, and not very many engineers are regularly checking their LinkedIn. This means almost half of the InMails you send aren't even delivered, making email a much better option. The challenge with email is that we need to break through the noise. Your average person receives 121 emails each day. And think about that for just a sec. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. If you're feeling busy that day, or if the reach out felt impersonal, or let's say that job opportunity just happens to land in your inbox as message 101, you might not respond. And that's what we're up against, and that's why these best practices are so important. Luckily, many of these best practices are easy to implement. It's just a matter of knowing what to do. And that brings us to our first best practice. Use a 4-stage email sequence to more than double your positive response rate. First of all, though, what's a sequence? Products like Gem allow you to send sequences, which are a set of stages that help you automate your follow-ups. Stage 1 is that initial outreach, and stages 2 through 4 are automated follow-ups. The beauty of sequences is that the follow-up stages only go out if there's no reply. In that sense, sequences allow us to put our outreach on autopilot. So why send a 4-stage sequence? Well, when you look at the data, response rate goes steadily up from 15% email number 1 all the way to 35% when you send 4 stages. And this is average across all of our users. Not too shabby, especially when you compare it to the industry-wide response rate of 13% for InMail. You may be wondering, though, how many of these responses were actually positive? Well, we took this a level deeper, and we manually tagged responses as yeses and nos. Yes being I'm interested, I'll hop on that call, or I'll grab that coffee. What we found is that less than half of your yeses come from email number 1, right? About half of them come from follow-ups 2 through 4. So if we aren't sending follow-ups, we're missing out on half of the yeses out there. Although we saw the response rate continue to climb after stage 4, we actually saw a big spike of no's. And as you can imagine, that could harm your employer brand. So all in, a 4-stage sequence strikes the right balance of connecting with talent while preserving the option to reach out again down the road. And having that optionality to nurture over the next few quarters is really great, especially if you're investing in something like a CRM. Key takeaway here, follow up. Silence doesn't mean rejection. Think of yourself. If you receive an out-of-network email and you're busy, it may not be your top priority to respond. That, combined with the fact that emails typically have a pretty short lifespan, mean it's important to follow up. But also, don't neglect the timing, which leads us to best practice number 2, the best times and days to send. We looked at open rate to understand the best time of day to reach out. What we found is that typically Mondays and Tuesdays are the best on average, usually around lunchtime. However, when we segmented by role, we found this wasn't always the case. Take engineering managers, for example. Saturday afternoon to Sunday afternoon performed 10% better than the average. And Wednesday through Friday during the workday performed 5% worse. Our theory is that engineering managers are in back-to-back meetings all day during the week, and they aren't getting through non-urgent email until the weekend. Data for engineers actually looks somewhat similar, with Saturday and Sunday being the best times. Outreach to recruiters looked pretty different though. Monday and Tuesday at lunchtime performed 20% better than the average. This was nearly the biggest spike we saw across all of the roles. Wednesday through Friday continued to perform worse, except for at lunchtime, which continued to perform 5% better than average, regardless of the day of the week. So it seems that, while we're spending a lot of our time in email as recruiters in general, it looks like a lot of us are using our lunch breaks to check our personal email. The last thing we pulled was sales. Sales folks were 20% more likely to respond Sunday afternoon all the way through 6 p.m. And we were a little bit surprised by this, so we went and asked our sales team. Well, it turns out a lot of our sales team are carving out time on Sundays to be online to plan for the week ahead. So that happens to be a really great time to catch them in their inbox. So the key takeaways: send on different days and times depending on your role. You should also mix up your time of day and your day of week across each stage. Just because engineering managers prefer weekends on average doesn't mean that every engineering manager does. So varying what time you send increases your chance that one of your emails will catch somebody at the opportune time for them. As a side note, you probably shouldn't send on the hour every hour, especially during the work week. Think about your schedules at work. You're probably jumping into a meeting right at the start of the hour. You might want to try sending 5 or 10 minutes before the hour in case somebody gets out of that meeting early and has a few minutes to check email. And last thing here, test for yourself. These things actually change over time. Marketers have been studying send time for a while now, and what they found is that it changes every year. As more people discover the best time to send, that time starts to become saturated and it becomes less effective. So while we're giving these averages, test for yourself on some cadence. And on our end, we'll publish an annual report. So you're also welcome to follow along on our blog. All right, but what about the timing of our follow-ups? Essentially, how far apart should you space each email as opposed to the time of day, how many days in between? This is sometimes known as a cadence. It turns out the most common time between emails is 6 days from the first to the second, another 6 days until the third, and then 3 days until the fourth. Internally, we call this the 663. At first glance, it might seem somewhat arbitrary. But when you map a 663 onto a calendar, you'll notice that each email falls on a different day of the week. And arriving in the inbox on different days is powerful because everyone's schedule is different. So you're increasing the chances that you'll catch somebody on a day that's best for them. The 544 just happens to be another common cadence that mixes up every day of the week. The 663 implies that you might also want to speed up your fourth follow-up at the end. And this actually makes a little bit of sense given how GEM users use our product. Spacing out emails 1, 2, and 3 gives your prospect enough time to learn about and think about your opportunity. From there, many of our users send one final email shortly after, oftentimes what we call the breakup email. A breakup email, as the name suggests, includes something to indicate this is the last time your prospect will hear from you, hence a breakup email. And when they're done right, they get really cool results. In my experience, the best breakup emails are funny or a little bit self-deprecating, and they oftentimes have nothing to do with your role. So to recap, avoid 7-day gaps and test cadences that land on different days of the week, like the 663 or the 544. Next up, we have personalization. In an ideal world, we would all personalize every single email, right? But there's actually a real trade-off between personalization and speed. So I'll jump straight to the punchline. Based on our data, it probably doesn't make sense to do heavy personalization for every role. Before we dive into the data, let me explain how personalization works in GEM so you can understand the results. There are 3 ways to personalize in GEM, ranging from completely automated to completely manual. I'll explain each method in more depth in the next few slides, but at a high level, the first is completely automated by using what we call tokens, which substitute in things like name, company, title, school, directly into your message. The second is semi-automated, where you write 1 or 2 sentences, a reason for reaching out, which also gets populated into your message. The third is completely manual, where you customize big parts of your initial reach out or your follow-ups for every single candidate. This is a highly personalized approach where you still benefit from the automated follow-ups. To expand on each, let's start with tokens. For those of you who don't know what tokens are, they're kind of like Mad Lib for your reach outs. They allow us to plug in information specific to each candidate directly into our message. The great thing about tokens is that they're automatically pulled from someone's LinkedIn profile, so they're no extra work. For that reason, tokens are great for lightweight personalization at scale. This technique is also known as mail merge, and for those of us that aren't using mail merge or tokens, we're almost certainly typing out someone's name, if not more, each time we reach out. The second approach is semi-automated, using what we call the reason token. The idea is to take a minute to write 1 or 2 sentences about why we're reaching out to the candidate, and we can do this directly alongside LinkedIn. And from there, the reason token gets plugged into your outreach when you send, just like any other token. We actually see a 10 to 20% increase in response rate on average for messages that include a reason token. The last option is to do heavy personalization. GEM actually allows us to do this right alongside LinkedIn by dropping someone directly into an email sequence. Your basic tokens auto-populate, and now you can personalize any aspect of the reach out, including the message, the subject line, or even a follow-up. And the great thing is that you can do this all from the LinkedIn profile while looking at their profile and not leaving the tab. GEM also serves up social media like Twitter, GitHub, Dribbble, in case you want to dive even deeper and reference something that stands out. Along the lines of personalization and cutting through the noise, one common technique that can feel even more personal is to send the messages on behalf of a hiring manager or even a director. So in this screenshot here, you'll see I'm signed in as Steve, but I'm sending as Nick. You can also send from different senders per stage if you want to be even more high touch. For example, at GEM, we just hired our head of product. Emails number 1 and 2 came from Nick, our CTO, with email 1 being highly personalized. Then email 3 and 4 came from me. And because we were sending email 3 as me, it went something like, "Hi, first name, was catching up with my co-founder, Nick, who said he reached out last week. We were both really excited about your experience doing XYZ, so I thought I'd shoot you a note to see if you're open to grabbing a coffee." Feels pretty good, right? What's cool about send on behalf of is you can set up the sequence yourself, but then send to someone else. And the follow-ups still happen automatically. And if you're sending from multiple senders, the sequence stops if they respond to either inbox. So continuing to put your outreach on autopilot. So tying this all together, different levels of personalization make sense for different roles. The trade-off is speed versus response rate. If your talent pool is pretty big and you're already getting a high response rate, it might make sense to stick with tokens. For example, if we're hiring a junior sales rep, tokens allow us to source more candidates in less time. When your role is harder to fill, it makes sense to write 1 or 2 sentences to get that 20% boost in response rate. This might be roles like machine learning or experienced hires or even diversity candidates. And for very hard to fill roles like leadership or really specialized roles like a senior engineer with self-driving car experience, your talent pool might only include a few dozen qualified candidates. And in this case, it's crucial to put your best foot forward every time. And that's where highly personalized reach outs from someone senior in your company can be effective. All right, next up, we're going to talk about subject lines, and we'll actually highlight a few cool examples from GEM users. Continuing with the theme of personalization, we find that a personalized subject line increases your open rate by 26%. Some GEM users use tokens like name, school, or company to get that lightweight layer personalization. Others will use a second reason token for harder to fill roles. Because we typically recommend your subject lines be shorter, we suggest a few words if you're going to use a reason token. Perhaps you could highlight a skill set or previous project that stood out directly in the subject. If you have a strong mission statement that you think will resonate, you may want to speak to something about your prospect's values. Here are a few cool examples from our customers. Alternatively, if you could appeal to someone's curiosity and get them thinking, you could consider some of these subject lines and the types of questions that they might invoke. But no matter what, keep your subject lines somewhat short. Up to 60% of emails are opened on mobile. And as we all know, our mobile screens have limited real estate, right? So for that reason, we typically recommend under 50 characters. One technique I always do is I send myself a preview to see whether that subject line gets cut off on my mobile device. It's also a great best practice for testing your message content. The goal being, let's make sure that our most important content is visible before scrolling on mobile, especially if we're doing any personalization in that initial reach out. Which actually leads us to the message content itself. In a recent survey, candidates stack ranked what they want to know about your opportunity and your company. The hard part is knowing which information to lead with. One technique we recommend is to highlight the areas where you think you're strongest in that initial message, and then introduce new topics or concepts in each of your follow-ups. And some of that content may work best outside of your email, such as a blog post about the day in the life or about your company values. Linking to content is great because it helps keep your messages short while giving your prospect the opportunity to learn more about you. And if you link to multiple pieces of content, your prospect can self-select into the things they care about most. And if you're using something like GEM, you can even see which content they click into and have an idea of what's important before even hopping on that initial phone screen. We've actually compiled a ton of really great examples of initial reach outs from our users. If this is an area you're interested in, check out our definitive guide, which includes all of these best practices today and a ton more. And you can actually find it in the webinar. We'll also email it to you after this webinar. And that brings us to our last best practice, and arguably the most important one, which is to always be testing. While we've shared a few best practices that are a really great starting point, every company and every role is different. And remember that things like time of day change over time. Here are a few ideas that you could test. Track link clicks to see which content is most engaging, whether that's a blog post about your values, your culture, or some positive press. track open rates to see which subject lines are working. Test different lengths of messages or subject lines. Try sending from a teammate or different team members per stage to see who gets the highest response rate, and a whole lot more. On our end, we've already tested a lot of these. So again, you can check them out in the definitive guide that we'll send out afterwards. In a second, we're going to show you how to actually automate a bunch of these best practices in GEM. But before we do that, I thought it might be interesting to field a few questions. So actually, Ryan, have there been some good questions from the audience?
Yeah, we have a couple here. We have a handful. We'll see how many we can get through. All right, so first one, Steve, is can you give a real life example of your favorite breakup email?
Oh, let me think. Usually I like the self-deprecating kinds where, you make some sort of joke about how they must be totally not interested, or they must really, really have hated your first message or two. For me, appealing to humor tends to work really well for that fourth stage breakup email.
Yeah. So yeah, and I'll agree with that one. Okay, so do you have? I don't know if you can have these numbers off the top. So if not, we can always get back to people. Do you have approximate numbers regarding the increase in click rate? We see strong open rates when we personalize, but lower click rates.
Oh, interesting. Is this personalizing for the subject line
The
or the
subject,
message body?
yeah. Yeah, subject line, sorry. They have SL in parentheses there. So yeah, so they're personalizing the subject line. It's increasing the open rates, but their messaging or content still isn't getting a higher click rate there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, we typically see that when the open rate is higher, that actually the click rate and the response rate gets a little boost. Intuitively, it makes sense. If more people are hooked by your subject line and read your email, there's just going to be more people in the message body itself, right? So it's actually surprising that for this sequence, we're seeing a lower click-through rate or a lower response rate, or that it's not moving. Then again, like your mileage may vary, right? So if we're finding that the open rate is improving, but our message content isn't generating more clicks or more responses, probably a good signal that we should iterate on the message content next.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys have. If not, I'm sure we can put something together. Maybe I don't know if you have anything around best practices for creating email content or content around messaging for candidates. That seems to kind of be the common thread in some of these questions. So we'll maybe afterwards.
Oh yeah.
On that, yeah.
Yeah, actually, we have a whole section on that. We have about 5 or 6 pages in our definitive guide, which everybody will get after this session. And we dive into a lot of great examples. I had 3 themes in the presentation today, but we have 6 or 7 different high-level themes with 3 or 4 examples for each.
Perfect. Good. So for everyone on the call, we will make sure that everybody gets that in the follow-up email, and you'll have it in the presentations as well. Okay, so this one's around personalizing as well. Do you recommend personalizing the email content based on hobbies they've listed in their profile, or do you recommend sticking to the opportunity?
Yeah, so we don't have hard data on which works better. But my instinct is that anything that just shows that you did your homework is going to do better than something like just substituting in company, title, name, and school, right? I think at this point a lot of folks are somewhat used to that. It still gives you a little bit of a boost, but if you want that 20% boost, I think you want to be different, right? So I think referencing hobbies can actually be a really great way to do that. Especially if you can get creative with that. I've actually seen recruiters, insert like GIFs and things like that related to the hobby, and I think it can just be like a really fun way to stand out.
Yeah, and I think we might get to this in the demo. I haven't seen this part of it, but the next question here is, can you explain the custom token example that you shared? I guess that was the screen where you had the custom token on the bottom right. So is this something where the user could, for example, on their profile, see a hobby listed or something, make that note there, and then in the emails have that token placed properly, and that would cover that across a number of profiles.
That's exactly right. So that custom token is specific to each profile you visit. So you would type it out for is Dan's screen live, right?
It is, yes.
It's showing? Cool. So in a second, Dan will show you how we could source Alan. But that reason token would show up, and you'd be able to customize that reason specific to Alan. And then you move on to the next profile, and you can customize it again. There's actually a much easier way to personalize for each individual if we're sending as we go.
Mm-hmm.
But the cool thing about the reason token is it allows us to build up a big list and send at the end of the day, while taking like that minute to write 1 or 2 sentences while we're on the profile. And
right.
Typically what we recommend is that you plug in that reason at the end of your first paragraph or your second paragraph for a few reasons. One, if you choose to leave it blank or you forget, it just won't show up and your message still reads well. Two, it's important to keep that personalization near the top of your message. And largely because like that's really your opportunity to cut through the noise and get people to keep reading. In addition, if they're viewing on mobile, you wouldn't want them to have to scroll to see your personalization, right?
Yeah, and so this goes to the next question. Perfect segue. Do you have an ideal length or number of words for an email sent for the first, second, third, or fourth emails?
We do for the first. I'm forgetting what it is off the top of my head, but this is one of those questions that we can take offline and be sure to get back to you on.
Okay, so we'll make sure we, and I just sent the asker a note, let them know we'll get back. Okay, so there was another question here. Oh, and I don't know if these are the right numbers. I'll just read it off though. Are the 663 and 554 send cadence at Gen? Do you find? Oh, let me see. Gen, find this marketing. Oh, okay. Sorry, I had to reread this here. Are the 663 and 554 send cadences a gem find, or is that a marketing best practice?
That's a gem find based on top of all of our data. In fact, I think everything except for the industry stats that we shared in the beginning, all based on top of gem data.
Perfect. Okay, good. And let's see, we can probably fit one more in here. Let's find a good one here. Yep. Well, we have one. I don't know if this is something that we can answer here, but it was more about your thoughts. What are your thoughts on emails compared to texting using, a texting platform? Which do you think works better?
That's actually a great question. So I think that it depends on the role you're hiring for. So for highly skilled like knowledge workers, anyone in tech, right? Leadership roles, executive roles, things like that. They actually don't expect text, and also they're checking their email pretty frequently. When it comes to blue collar workers, we've heard that text can actually be pretty effective, and for a few reasons. One, usually you can source them in platforms outside of LinkedIn where you can have access to their phone number in the first place, right? Texting just really isn't an option for most people that you find on LinkedIn because phone numbers aren't readily available. And two, folks in those types of industries, they're not checking their email very often. In fact, they're way more used to text. So what we find is that for the tech industry at a whole and for knowledge workers, email performs better. And then there's also just this practical issue of, well, how are you going to find somebody's phone number, right?
Right. Okay, one more question, because this is one that I like here. Did your sales team share why Wednesday to Saturday are the worst days to respond?
No, but I have a guess. My guess is that, sales is oftentimes thinking in sprints, both in terms of quarters and weeks, and we're looking to close out as much business as we can each quarter, each week. And by the end of that week, you're mostly focused on trying to catch your prospect before they leave for the weekend, right? And after a long week of sales, you're probably cutting loose and blowing off some steam, right? On a Friday and Saturday, and not really focused on your email, especially since your prospects, your customers, they're not going to really be checking their email on a Friday and a Friday night and Saturday afternoon, right? So the Sunday reasoning makes a lot of sense to me because even though your customer is not online, you're actually doing your prep for the week ahead.
Good. Yeah, I was hoping that wasn't going to get your sales team in trouble there as you were thinking about that. But yeah, why aren't they getting back to people? That's a good question. No, and that makes perfect sense, and it's a great response. So, okay, good. That's what we have in terms of questions for this part. So, Dan, we are looking at your screen, and just so everyone knows, this is going to be a really cool part of the webinar today. You're going to get to see some of this stuff in action and see how everything we just heard from Steve previously is now how you can actually put this into use. So, Steve, did you want to transition?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks so much, Ryan, and great questions. Keep them coming. Really excited to introduce everybody to Dan Cohen. He's on the GEM team here. He's prepped a demo for you all, and we're going to tailor it specifically to a bunch of the best practices we talked about today. So we'll see how those tokens work in action. We'll see how you can test your sequences, maybe try different subject lines and things like that, how we can measure our open rate, click rate, response rate, all that good stuff. So really excited to introduce Dan and kick it over to him.
Thanks so much, Steve. Cool. So if everyone can see my screen for this next segment, I'm just going to walk through the GEM platform and basically exactly how to apply those best practices that Steve was talking about and just show you how they look in action. So this should look pretty familiar. I'm just on a LinkedIn profile of this candidate, Alan Cohen, happens to be my brother. Just for context, GEM will work with any version of LinkedIn. And for my setup today, we've integrated with Greenhouse, although GEM does integrate with many ATSs in the market. So anytime we're on a LinkedIn profile, GEM's going to pop up on the right side of the screen. And it's going to show me a few pieces of information about the candidate at a glance. First, does the candidate exist in our ATS? If anyone has taken an action on the candidate from my team, like perhaps viewed the profile or sent or received an email from that candidate. And lastly, GEM will actually provide emails for candidates that you can use to reach out. Using this information, we can get a good sense of whether it's fair game for me to reach out to the candidate, if I'm stepping on anyone else's toes. To add the candidate to GEM, we'll save their profile to PDF. GEM will automatically parse that PDF into a profile for us. So we'll get things like first name, last name, company, title, school, and location. And these actually become those tokens that we can use in our email outreach to add that lightweight layer of personalization. Now let's actually go into GEM and see what that email template looks like. So this is the email template I've built and that I'm going to add Alan to in just a second here. But as you can see here, I can use any of these tokens in the subject line or the body of the message. And we can set up those follow-ups as well. And what do you know, we're following that best practice for a 4-stage sequence. I'm going to click back over into the LinkedIn profile of the candidate. From here, I can add the candidate to our ATS when we source them, or we can add them later on, maybe when we've gotten a positive response. I can also take a minute to do some personalization for the candidate while I'm viewing their profile. So if you see down here, we have that reason token, and in the sequence, I've added it to the end of that first paragraph, so that if I do take a minute to add that personalization in and write up a reason for why I'm reaching out to Alan, that's great. It's going to pop up in my email. If I choose not to, we'll just see the email without that reason token, and because of where I've put it, won't affect the structure of the email. Once I add Alan to this sequence, it's actually going to pop up right on top of the LinkedIn profile, so I can make any edits or changes right here. I can choose to send the message now, or I can choose to send it later. I can personalize the message further if I want to do any manual personalization. And if and only if we don't get a response from that first message, we'll continue to follow up with any messaging you've created on whatever timeline you specify. So in this case, we have a 4-stage sequence that goes out over a couple of weeks, following those best practices that Steve mentioned. In this case, I actually have the second message coming from Steve. I'm using an alias so that if the candidate responds, the message would come as a response to me. But this helps us break through the noise. The second message just says, hey, was just talking to Dan on my team, and your name came up, would be excited to connect. This helps us stand out and gets us a higher likelihood that the candidate will respond. I've even added some content in the third message coming from Steve to hopefully get the candidate excited about life at GEM. And then that fourth message is going to come from me, sort of that breakup email. If not now, no problem. Let's reconnect whenever the timing is right for you. I'm going to rewind just a second here so we can look at how the reason token actually works in action. So if I'm on Alan's profile and I want to do some personalization, maybe I want to add him to a sequence now, or I want to add him later once I've added a whole list of candidates to a list. I can add my personalization in this reason field here. Saw that you spent some time at MIT. Steve went to the same school. Have you crossed paths? When I add Alan to that sequence, it's going to add my personalization directly to that end of that first paragraph. Here, I'm adding the candidate to the sequence on the fly, so this message would get sent out now if I hit send. But I could also just add Alan to a list and have that sent out at another time. I'm also varying my time of day and day of week. If I need to make any edits to that, we can do that really easily on the fly from LinkedIn. So GEM makes it really easy to actually send those sequences out. We also make it really easy to test what's working and what's not. So if you're on your sequences page on gem.com, you can measure your sequences against each other to see things like open rates on the emails that you send, click rates on the content within those sequences, and the response rate to the sequences themselves. You can also do some A/B testing here, which we highly encourage. Maybe I want to change the subject line of that sequence, maybe in line with that best practice that Steve mentioned about including a token in the subject line. So I've made a copy of this sequence very easily with GEM here. I'm going to name this copy B so that we know we're testing. And the only edit I'm going to make here is just to add a first name to the subject line of the sequence. There's a bit of a trade-off here. The message is going to be, the subject line is going to be slightly longer, but it does include their first name in that subject line. After we've added a few candidates to that sequence and let some time go on, we can check back on our sequences page and see, did that change affect our open rate for that sequence? Now, we give you these high-level stats to measure sequences against each other. We can also get more granular on the actual stages within your sequences. So if you want to see things like the click rate or response rate for individual messages within your sequences to see which messages that I'm sending are actually getting candidates to respond, we can click into those and get that granular detail of the actual messages themselves. We can also see for an individual candidate how they're interacting with our emails and content so that we can tailor our re-engagement to these candidates if they don't respond. So looking at Adam, for example, here, if I click on this icon here, I can see the full story of when he's opened my email, when he's clicked on links. I can see which emails he opened and when he took those actions. So maybe I tailor the content that I send him next time to the content that he was looking at in my first reach out, or even see, hey, Adam's more likely to open messages when I send them at 9 a.m. I want to make sure that next time I reach out, I do the same thing. We'll also help you understand how the content in your sequences is working. So in this sequence, I've added a few pieces of content within several stages. And Gem's going to tell me not just if candidates are clicking on that link, but when they click on them, are they responding to that email? This helps us better understand which pieces of content candidates are resonating with. That way, when we reach out in the future, we can tailor that content specifically to the roles that we're reaching out to. Lastly here, Gem gives you a great way to see your activity and performance across your entire team. So on our outreach stats page, we can see broken down by time how many candidates we reached out to, and then the open rate, response rate, and interested rate for these candidates. This is a view showing me broken down by team member. I can also filter these things, filter this view by individual users, by teams of recruiters or sourcers that we have on the team, or I can filter by a particular project. So if we are using maybe a couple of sequences on one role, we can see for that role as a cohort, how have we been performing within that specific cohort of candidates. Cool. Didn't get a chance to see the questions that were asked, but maybe it's a good time to look at those.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple that came in. Oh, hang on one second. Let's see. Here we go. I've got them now. Okay, so we've had a couple questions come in. And see, does Gem work with tags for those that are clicking, or does it add the person to a specific list for future marketing?
Let's see. So just want to make sure I fully understand that question. Does Gem work with tags? So the way it works is that the specific link that was clicked is we service that directly in the dashboard. Actually, Dan, given that we're still showing your screen, could you go to an actual sequence report where we have some links clicked and show what that looks like? So so here, we're actually tagging it with the actual link that was clicked. So at the moment, though, we don't have any sort of like, if this link is clicked, add them to this other project or list, which I imagine that could be the question. So not at the moment, but it's actually on our roadmap. We get asked that fair amount of times.
Yeah, I think where that was probably going, it sounds like they might be using another marketing software, but what I'm assuming it was going to is if they're clicking, can they set another action or trigger after they've clicked on the link for a follow-up?
Totally. So one way that, oh, sorry, what was that?
No, I was saying, I think that's where the question was going.
Makes sense. Yeah. So one thing that we have, it's a little bit more manual than that, but you could imagine, doing this a few months after your sequence or once per month while it's running. So if you go back to the view tracking stats for 26 links, you can actually just filter the entire report by who clicked it. And then you can take a bulk action on those users and add them all to a project or another sequence from there. Cool. What's next in terms of questions, Ryan?
Okay, so the same person says, do these tags get, and I don't know if this is going to be relevant now, but do these tags get added through LinkedIn or through email? So I'm not sure how that, maybe we get that word better.
So I wonder if this person is referring to like company, title, school, things like that. Do you think they're referring to like a lot of the demographic information that we're auto tagging?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'm going to send a message and see if we get that clarified before we answer that. There was a question here about A/B testing. How is A/B testing done via email, or is it restricted to email alone?
So A/B testing, you can actually run A/B tests both for emails and in-mails. We didn't demo it, but you can actually include in-mails in your sequence stages.
Okay.
Unfortunately, just to set expectations with everybody, we can't actually automate the in-mails fully for you. There's no other platforms that can do that on the market, and the reason is LinkedIn doesn't allow any automation of their platform or any scraping. So the cool thing though is you can set up some in-mail stages in a sequence with Gem, and then we'll remind you on the day that it's time to send that in-mail stage. We'll link you directly back to their recruiter profile with the in-mail box open. So we saved you a few clicks there. And then we have a copy button, which lets you copy the body and paste it directly in. And the cool thing about that copy button is that we automatically substitute in all the tokens that you had for that stage. So you're not typing in company or title or school or anything like that.
Right. Okay. And we have one more question, or a couple here that just came in. Can candidates be assigned to multiple pipelines? If so, can they be seen by the user?
Yes. So your prospects can both be in multiple projects at the same time, and they can be in shared projects across the entire team or individual projects. They can also be in multiple sequences, but we have some guardrails in the product to warn you that, hey, like you're adding these for candidates that have already been sequenced, right? But the use case for that is real, right? So you could imagine that maybe a sourcer is reaching out, but then somebody who's hosting an event also wants to invite them to an event in parallel. And so that's why we support multiple sequences at the same time.
Right. Okay. And so we have another question here. This one's about beyond LinkedIn. Are there other platforms that integrate with Gem, such as ZipRecruiter, Aperture, Profiles?
Yeah, totally. So we integrate with most major ATSs, and we also integrate with the Aperture CRM. One of the really cool things there is that we can give you visibility both. So actually, Dan, if you go back to Alan's profile and let's just pull up the greenhouse section. So if you scroll down, you can see we're giving a lot of visibility into your ATS about Alan, what role he was considered for, when was the last update for that role. And you can even take a ton of common actions. You can move him through stages, reject him right there, convert him into process if he's a prospect. The cool thing is we also integrate with Aperture. So if you're using Aperture as your CRM, and then you're also using, say, Workday as your ATS, we can look into both and give you visibility across all of them at the same time.
Okay. Now this one here, and let's see if this one works for you here on the webinar. If not, we can get that answered later. LinkedIn's not a good source for truck drivers and owners operators. Would I be able to use this strictly to email from my corporate site, I guess from their ATS, still making full use of the dashboard provided by Gem?
Absolutely. And there's a few ways you can do that. For some of the applicant tracking systems, we have an Add to Gem button directly alongside their Greenhouse profile. Actually, Dan, do you want to demo that for Greenhouse? If we just jump into Alan's profile or something like that, we can show what that looks like. So directly alongside the profile in the ATS, you can, actually Dan has this draft, so we're automatically pulling it up, but let's discard that draft. Let's pretend like we were looking at Alan from scratch. But we inject a button onto the ATS page that allows you to open the sidebar. If they're already in Gem, we would just pull them up as you can see here. But Dan just removed Alan from Gem. Let's see, so now we can click the Add Candidate button, and that imports the full profile based on your ATS data. The cool thing about that is now we can sequence Alan directly alongside the ATS, just like we can alongside LinkedIn. And a lot of our customers use this to source directly from their ATS, or to deal with the use case that you just described. The other option is, if we don't fully support your ATS yet, is you can export a CSV from your ATS and import a whole list of folks in bulk. And Gem does a really good job of matching those fields directly to Gem fields. So if you're capturing in your ATS things like name, company, title, school, and even other custom information, we can upload all of that directly to a Gem project in bulk. And then we can bulk sequence. Gem, or Dan, I forget if we showed the bulk sequencing flow, but maybe we could just real quick show what that looks like for folks interested in importing a list. So we would add the sequence. I think we pressed cancel, by the way. Add the sequence. We can choose that same sequence that Dan was just demoing before, and then this is going to open up a bulk send flow where if you can see that we've imported all of those recipients, all of the fields that you imported from your CSV would show up here as well. And then if you click into edit stages, you'll see the message content for each person, and you can even take time to personalize for each recipient. So if you click into Nathan, that's going to pull up a message specific to Nathan where we can start typing some sort of personalization. Cool.
All right. So, question around different sources. Can Gem pull in from Facebook, GitHub, or Stack Overflow?
So that's a really interesting question. We get that one a lot. The interesting thing, and we actually haven't prioritized this because most recruiters we talk to, when they ask that question, they're still checking LinkedIn to see where this person works and what their up-to-date title is. So even though you're finding them on Facebook or GitHub or Dribbble, we're oftentimes like wanting to see, what is their current employment status. So almost everybody we talk to, 95% of recruiters are actually reverting back to LinkedIn, even if they're finding somebody somewhere else. The cool thing about that is that's a very natural place for you to one-click add them to Gem and sequence them. At some point in the future, we'll probably build out support for other social sites, but it just hasn't been that big of a pain point for most of our customers. I think there was one more thing that I meant to add there, but I forget what it was, so we'll leave it at that.
Yep. And final question I have here is, does Gem have plans for a native mobile app?
Interesting. So that's another one where I think we'll have one eventually, but sourcing is such a volume game, right? And it really requires us to be efficient. And what we find from talking to our customers is that to be the most efficient, they want to be in front of their computer where they have access to a keyboard and a mouse and a pretty big screen, sometimes for multiple different tabs, right? And we don't hear of that many people sourcing on mobile. And if they are, it's usually an edge case. It's like, oh, I'm in the airport, I had some time, I forgot my laptop, right? So it just hasn't been that big of a priority yet for our customers.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, though, there are definitely some use cases that we think are interesting for mobile. For example, we have a hiring manager review flow where you can source 50 prospects, submit them all for review to your hiring manager, and then they can go through rapid fire and thumbs up, thumbs down. The cool thing is because we have that PDF resume, they can pull up that profile really quickly and give you a quick calibration on whether it makes sense to reach out to this person. For workflows like that, we think it actually makes a lot of sense. The other workflows where we think it makes sense is, so that you can read a comment on a profile. So if a coworker ropes you into a candidate or a prospect, being able to see that activity feed live on your phone and being able to comment directly. But for that, as it stands today, we actually have, the site actually works on mobile, so you can at least get some basic functionality there.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Well, we are up on the hour. Steve, Dan, this has been fantastic. A lot of great information and a lot of good questions coming through on the demo portion too, which is always exciting to see. So for everyone that's still here on the call, a recording will be posted shortly after we just have to bring everything down, get it all together, and we'll get it up on the site, and we will email that along with some of the resources that were mentioned earlier. Also, there are a handful of people in the audience that were asking about pricing and things like that. Steve, did you want to go through that now, or do you want me to make connections and we'll send them some stuff after?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Typically, we're pricing out per seat for the GEM sourcing product. We've also got a CRM product, and there's typically we like to get to some sort of enterprise agreement where everybody on your team can have access, and we'll price that out usually to the size of your team. The thinking for sourcing is that maybe it's most relevant to just a few members of the team, or not everybody is necessarily doing heavy sourcing, but for a CRM, you really want your entire recruiting team on it. And then for teams above a certain size, we're often able to get to an enterprise site license agreement, even for the sourcing product. And that way you're just like not worrying about who gets a seat, who doesn't. We can even give every single hiring manager a seat if they're doing sourcing.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you again, Steve. Thank you, Dan. And of course, to everyone over at GEM and everyone on the call. We will have this up shortly, and enjoy the rest of your afternoons.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.